Turn in your Bibles to 2 Chronicles chapter 32. 2 Chronicles, that's be sort of in the front of your Old Testament. We have the chronicling of the kings of Israel and Judah, mainly found in the books of Samuel, Kings, and then Chronicles. So I'll give you time to turn over there. I want to read one verse. I want to pick out one verse out of that chapter to read. It's 2 Chronicles chapter 32 and verse 31. And it concerns King Hezekiah. King Hezekiah was a well-known king in the Old Testament. We talk about Hezekiah. We usually talk about his miraculous healing that the Lord gave him and added 15 years to his life. We might talk about that a little bit, but I do want to talk about King Hezekiah, the lessons out of his life that the Lord has provided for our lives. And I want to read this verse to you, and we'll explore it a little further as we go. 2 Chronicles chapter 32, verse 31 reads, "Howbeit in the business of the ambassadors of the princes of Babylon, who sent unto him to inquire of the wonder that was done in the land, God left him to try him, that God might know all that was in his heart." So in verse 31, we have ambassadors of the princes of Babylon coming to the land of Judah to see King Hezekiah, and they want to make an inquiry of something. And it says here they wanted to make an inquiry of the wonder that was done in the land. Well, what wonder did they come all the way to Judah to inquire about from King Hezekiah? Then in the last part of the verse, it says, God left him. That is, God left Hezekiah. What does that mean, that God left him? Well, we know the reason why God left him. God says, to try him. In other words, to put him on trial, his life on trial, to see what decisions he would make. It's sort of like when God tried Abraham, when God told Abraham to sacrifice his one and only son, Isaac. He put him on trial. Now we know Abraham passed that trial. He did exactly as the Lord told him. And then instead of a son, he provided a ram for the offering so he could spare his son. How about Hezekiah? God left him to try him, that he might know all that was in his heart. We might go back to that verse, but we can go over to 2 Kings chapter 18. That's a few chapters before the one we're at, 2 Kings chapter 18. And we're going to talk about the life of Hezekiah. Hezekiah, as we read in the scriptures, was a good and upright king. Why was he the king of Judah? Why wasn't he also the king of Israel? Well, to put this in context, at this time, the kingdom of Israel had split. We had, there was 12 tribes of Israel. This is not the exact number, but historically, when we say the kingdom split, there was 10 kingdoms of the north, and that was known as the kingdom of Israel. And then there are 2 tribes of the south, and that was the kingdom of Judah. The 2 tribes of the south and Judah encompassed the southern part of the land of Palestine, and also encompassed Jerusalem, which was the place of worship. So this is what was occurring during the time of Hezekiah. Hezekiah was the son of Ahaz. Ahaz was a very evil king. He instituted and approved of idol worship. Under his reign, the doors of the house of God were nailed shut. Levitical priesthood was done away with. And Judah was in sad, sad shape. But God granted his people grace and sent Hezekiah as their king. It's amazing that such a good man would be raised and the father of him would be such an evil man. Also, we see that Hezekiah had a son. He was a very good king, but he had a son named Manasseh, and he was a very evil king once again. And he took the throne at 12 years of age at the death of Hezekiah. So, sandwiched in between these two evil kings, Ahaz and Manasseh, was Hezekiah. And this is an oasis in the history of the kingdom of Judah. So let's read the first few verses of 2 Kings chapter 18. We'll read about the early life and sort of an overview of the life of Hezekiah. It says, "Now it came to pass in the 3rd year of Hoshea, the son of Eli, the king of Israel, that Hezekiah, the son of Ahaz, king of Judah, began to reign. 25 years old was he when he began to reign, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was also Abi, the daughter of Zechariah. And he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, according to all that David his father did. He removed the high places and brake the images and cut down the groves and brake in pieces the brazen serpent that Moses has made, for unto those days the children of Israel did burn incense to it when he called it Nehushtan." Now what you have to understand was one of the first acts that Hezekiah did when he came into office, if you can say that, to his reign, is that he began to undo all the things his evil father Ahaz. He started to tear down the groves in which they would do this idol worship. And he would break down their idols and broke them in pieces. And also, if you remember, when Moses was leading the children of Israel out of Egypt, they began to murmur and complain and began to revolt. And so God caused poisonous serpents to go among them, and these serpents bit them. Many died, and many were sick. And so as a healing, something that the Lord sent was a healing, he told them to put a brazen serpent upon a pole and to lift that up. And whoever would gaze upon that, the sick that would gaze upon that, would be healed. To this day, the sign of medical healers, a hospital or doctors, have that serpent on a pole as the symbol of their profession of healing. So evidently, from the days of Moses, they had preserved this brazen serpent on the pole to the days of Hezekiah. But what they did was they turned a wonderful symbol of God into an object of idolatry. They began burning incense to it, bowing down to it, and worshiping it. I think that's one of the reasons God has not allowed us to find maybe the remnants of Noah's Ark, because people would start taking splinters from it and selling splinters of Noah's Ark. They would make it an object of idolatry, when God had definitely, that's one of the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not worship anything except the Lord thy God. So what did Hezekiah do? This antiquity of great significance, he destroyed it. And you know what? The Lord approved of that. He says, it's nothing but it's just nothing but metal. That's all it was meant to do. I gave it the healing power. And I would rather it be destroyed than people make it an object of idolatry. So that's what he did. And it says, verse 5, he trusted in the Lord, God of Israel, so that after him was none like him among all the kings of Judah, nor any that were before him. So we see how significant Hezekiah was. For he clave to the Lord. Now that word clave is used prior to this in the book of Genesis, when it's talking about a husband and wife. When they get together, they should cleave unto each other. That's very strong language. So you see that this intimate relationship that Hezekiah had with his Lord. He clave to the Lord and departed not from following him, but kept his commandments, which the Lord commanded Moses. So God likens him to King David. And God does this quite often when comparing bad and good kings and the quality of their reign. He'd always compare them to King David. King David was the standard. And you say, well, David has his faults. Absolutely, he certainly did. He had major faults, and as we do all. But he was the apple of the Lord's eye, and he was a symbol of the coming Messiah. But he did things like King David. And he also was compared to Moses in this thing. Moses was a great figure in the Old Testament. Verse 7, and the Lord was with him, and he prospered whithersoever he went forth, and he rebelled against the king of Assyria and served him not. And he smote the Philistines even unto Gaza, and the borders thereof, from the tower of the watchmen to the fenced city. So there was many things that Hezekiah did. One of the more famous things he did was he brought water into the city of Jerusalem. He went to Gihon, with their springs there, and he built aqueducts from there so that fresh water would come into Jerusalem. And he's praised for that in the Old Testament. Also, you read about him, he rebelled against the king of Assyria. Now, the greatest military power at that time was the kingdom of Assyria. We read about their country, their walled cities, especially their capital city, but we also read about their extreme brutality. They wanted to conquer other kingdoms, I believe, so that they could spread out their cruelty. They were very barbarous. When they would go against they were very feared because of their barbarism. They would make the skulls of their enemies drinking cups. They were just that bad. And they were coming after Israel. They'd already invaded Israel, and they're coming after Judah. And over in 2 Kings chapter 19, we read about Hezekiah's confrontation with the Assyrians. Well, little Judah has no chance against the kingdom of Assyria. Hundreds of thousands were in their army, and they were coming to take over Judah. In fact, the king of Assyria was saying all kinds of bad things about the land of Judah and Judah's God. He was making fun of them. And this distressed Hezekiah so much that he went down on his knees in prayer to the Lord. And the prayer that Hezekiah prays to the Lord for God's intervention and his protecting grace is recorded in the scriptures there. And so Assyria comes, and they're going to destroy Judah. Well, how does little Judah defend itself? They can't. So the Lord sent one angel, not a host of angels. Remember, Jesus Christ, when he was tried before Pilate, he says, you can't keep me unless I let you. Right now, I have 12 legions of angels at my command. That's thousands and thousands of angels. But in this case, God sent one angel among the army of Assyria and killed 185,000 Assyrians. One angel. That's how powerful an angelic being can be. And so God sort of, you can look at it as God sort of took pity on Assyria by only sending one angel. And the Lord told Hezekiah after his prayer, he says, don't worry. Assyria will not come into your country, and Assyria will not take Jerusalem. Right? So what did Hezekiah also do? The nails of the house of God, the doors of the house of God were nailed shut by evil King Ahaz. So he opened the doors of the house of worship once again. But one problem, Ahaz also got rid of the priesthood, the Levitical priesthood. So Hezekiah made great efforts to reinstitute the priesthood so that the temple of God could start going again. And also he reinstituted the Passover as well as all the feasts. So you see, this is a great time. This is a mountaintop experience in the timeline of Judah. All right, so now we're going to go over to 2 Kings chapter 20, and we're going to read the life of Hezekiah then. Now there's some key figures in what we're going to read. We're going to read about God. We're going to read about Hezekiah. We're also going to read about the king of Babylon, who is Baladan, and also the son of Baladan, who has a very long and complicated name. But after all these wonderful things that Hezekiah did for the nation of Judah, now we're going to see in 2 Kings chapter 20 and verse 1 what's going on here. It says, in those days was Hezekiah sick unto death. And what kind of sickness did he have? Well, we're going to find later on that it was described as a boil. But actually, if you look up the word in Old Testament language, I think Hezekiah was suffering from leprosy. And leprosy was going to kill him very, very soon. So he's in bed and he's sick. In those days was Hezekiah sick unto death, and the prophet Isaiah, the son of Amoz, came to him. Now, there was two prophets active during the reign of Hezekiah. One was Micah, and the other one was Isaiah. Of course, the most famous part of one of the most famous chapters or books of the Old Testament is the book of Isaiah. One of the clearest prophecies of the coming of the Messiah and Jesus Christ is recorded in the book of Isaiah. He was a great prophet. So he's dying in his bed, and here comes the prophet, here comes the preacher to come visit him. But Isaiah doesn't have very good bedside manner, as we're going to see. He's not a very good preacher to visit you in the hospital. He says, thus saith the Lord, set thine house in order, for thou shalt die and not live. Okay, thank you for those words, prophet. Verse 2, then he turned his face to the wall and prayed unto the Lord, saying, what did Hezekiah do? At the words of prophet, he turned his face to the wall. And I don't know what wall he's talking about. Maybe it's the wall, the prayer wall, that they still use as a prayer wall today in Israel. And he says the following words, verse 3, I beseech thee, O Lord, remember now how I have walked before thee in truth and with a perfect heart. Perfect rarely means flawless in the Old Testament or the New. It means mature and full. So he followed God with a fully mature faith and with a perfect heart, and have done that which is good in thy sight. And Hezekiah wept sore. So Hezekiah did not want to expire. Even though I think he was a believer, as Paul was, when Paul said, To be absent with the body is to be present with the Lord. He was not ready to go, and so he wept sore. And it came to pass afore Isaiah was gone out into the middle court. So before Isaiah had walked out the door, he was on his way out, that the word of the Lord came to him, saying, turn again, turn around, and tell Hezekiah, the captain of my people, that's a messianic term, captain of my people, thus saith the Lord, the God of David thy father, I have heard thy prayer and have seen thy tears. Behold, I will heal thee on the third day, that thou shalt go up into the house of the Lord. So he says, you're eaten up with leprosy, Isaiah, or in Hezekiah. You're just about to expire. And so the prophet, the preacher comes over and says, set your house in order, for you're going to die, and walks out the door, and he's leaving. Well, Hezekiah still prays an intercessory prayer. He prays for mercy. You know, the Bible tells all of us to pray. And we say, well, if the Lord is in control of all things, why should I have to pray? Some people believe that God has predestinated everything that happens in the future. God has not. A lot of people preach that and believe that today. And this is a clear example of that. God has not predestinated all things to come to pass. We know that the word predestination is very specific. It means he's predestinated all those chosen before the foundation of the world to be conformed to the image of the risen, resurrected Savior. He's predestinated us to be in that resurrected state and be in heaven. That's what God has predestinated. He has not predestinated all events. That's a critic of some of this doctrine that some people have, but it's not true. So Hezekiah prays to the Lord. What does the New Testament tell us when we pray? It says, ask, seek, and knock. A-S-K. Ask, seek, and knock. Because we don't know what the Lord's plan is. Sometimes he does have a plan, and he can always alter that plan upon our prayers. He says, remember the example of the evil judge, the unrighteous judge, because the woman kept bothering him for judgment, he granted it a request, not because he was a good judge, but because of her much asking and her bugging him. And that's what the Lord tells us, and tells us how to pray. He says, ask, seek, and knock. Knock continually. And the Lord will sometimes change his plans and grant your request. And that's called providence, God entering into the events of man. You remember well that Moses, when he was coming down Mount Sinai with the 2 tablets of stone, that he had left the people, but when they thought he was gone for too long, they formed a golden calf, made it an idol, and said, these be the gods that got us out of Egypt, and began to play, which we won't describe what their play involved. But it sounded like the sounds of war, according to Aaron, who was accompanying Moses up the mountain. When Moses came down and saw what they were doing, he was so disgusted, he broke the tables of stone. And God said, Moses, let me destroy this people, and I will raise you up a new people in their stead. But Moses prayed an intercessory prayer. He prayed for mercy upon these people, even though they were so evil, even though they had betrayed God and betrayed Moses. And I think that's the reason Moses broke those tables of stone. He felt like he was stabbed in the back. But he still had an abiding love for them. And aren't you glad? Because we are betrayers of God. How many times do we stab people in the back with our terrible behavior and with our words and our actions? But the Lord still loves us because we are his children. And that's the reason Moses prayed that intercessory prayer for those people, those evil people that were playing and idol worshiping, because they were children of God. They were his brothers and sisters. And God granted his request and repented of the evil that he was going to do to those people. Hezekiah did the same thing, brothers and sisters. Don't think that your future is etched in stone, that these events are unchangeable. God can change anything in your life, and Hezekiah is your example. Hezekiah prayed to the Lord, that we read verse 4, and it came to pass before Isaiah was gone out into the middle court, that the word of the Lord came to him, saying, Turn again and tell Hezekiah, the captain of my people, Thus saith the Lord, the God of David thy father, I have heard thy prayer, and I have seen thy tears. Behold, I will heal thee on the third day that thou goest up into the house of the Lord. So he promised him two things. He was going to heal him, and after 3 days, after he was going to have the strength to get up out of bed and walk up the steps and present himself at the house of God. That just seemed too good to be true. So what is, instead of Hezekiah saying, okay, thank you, great for the good news. No, Hezekiah says, send me a sign that this is going to be true. Look at verse 6. God's still speaking. And I will add unto thy days 15 years, and I will deliver thee and the city out of the hand of the king of Assyria. So God added, because of that prayer from Hezekiah, God added 15 years to his life. Same thing happened, in the life of Sister Pat and Brother Lamar. Brother Lamar was fighting cancer, and they took out part of his whole eye socket and part of his skull. And he prayed to the Lord that the God would intervene, because they told him he was done, that he would survive just a few more years so that he could see his children graduate and grow into adulthood. And God granted him that request. I think Sister Pat told me, I think it was about 15 years that God added to his life. So God can have mercy upon us. Verse 7, it says, let's read the rest of verse 6. And I will add unto thy days 15 years, and I will deliver thee and this city out of the hand of the king of Assyria, and I will defend this city for mine own sake, and for my servant David's sake. And Isaiah said, Take a lump of figs. And they took and laid it on the boil, and he recovered. What is a lump of figs? Well, I looked it up. I think it's a little mystery. I think it was a fig cake, But they took this compressed fig cake, and they put it on his leprous boil that was going to kill him, and he recovered. And Hezekiah said unto Isaiah, What shall be the sign? What shall be the sign that the Lord will heal me, and that I shall go up into the house of the Lord the third day? And Isaiah said, The sign shalt thou have of the Lord, that the Lord will do the thing that he has spoken. Shall the shadow go forward 10 degrees or go back 10 degrees? So Isaiah saying, God's going to give you a sign now that he's going to heal you, and that in 3 days you'll have the strength to go and show yourself at the house of God. And our best guesstimate about this is what he's talking about, he's talking about the official sundial. It was the official clock that they used in Judah in order to establish time. And he says, the sign that you're going to be healed, now this is important. He says, he gave Hezekiah the choice. He says, will the shadow increase 10 degrees or 10 steps? Or will it go back 10 steps or 10 degrees? In other words, are we going into the future? Or are we going into the past? And what does Hezekiah request? Verse 10. And Hezekiah answered it is a light thing for the shadow to go down 10 degrees. Nay, but let the shadow return backward 10 degrees. In other words, let's go back in time. And Isaiah the prophet cried unto the Lord, and he brought the shadow 10 degrees backward, by which it had gone down in the dial of Ahaz. At that time, and here's the son of the king of Babylon, Baladan, but his name is Berodach-Baladan. The son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sent letters and a present unto Hezekiah, for he had heard that Hezekiah had been sick. And Hezekiah hearkened unto them and showed them. So this is what happened. Babylon at this time is a big kingdom, and they were big astronomers. They looked at the sky for signs and studied them. They had charted the other planets. They had charted star systems. They were very interested in this. So when they had heard that Hezekiah had been sick, and also that he had been healed, and that a sign of his healing was that the sundial went back 10 degrees. In other words, the movement of the earth compared to the sun was altered by the Lord. In fact, he says he actually moved the sun. That's amazing. And they knew that from their measurements that this great miracle had happened. And so they wanted to come see. They wanted to come see. It says, verse 13, Hezekiah hearkened unto them, and so showed them all the house of his precious things. Okay, now this is getting into our verse over in 2 Chronicles. What Babylon did was it sent ambassadors and people from the country of Babylon over to the king of Judah. Now God had greatly blessed Hezekiah. Not only blessed Hezekiah to get things done, he blessed Hezekiah with wealth and riches. And when the ambassadors of Babylon came, they were actually there to inquire about the wonder. That brings us back over to 2 Chronicles, chapter 32, verse 31. Lost my place. I'm going to get back to it. Verse 31. Let's read our verse together. Howbeit in the business of the ambassadors of the princes of Babylon, who sent unto him to inquire of the wonder that was done in the land. That's what they were there. They were here to inquire about this wonder that was done in Judah that altered the sun. And that was done in the land. God, but listen to this. God left him in order to try him, that God might know all that was in his heart. Abraham was tried by God, and he passed with flying colors. Because why? Because he did exactly what the Lord told him to do, no matter what the cost was. Now God is trying, now it says God left Hezekiah. When did God leave Hezekiah? And according to our timeline here, God left Hezekiah right before the ambassadors from Babylon showed up. Now, that's not a very happy verse, is it? God left him. We know that God is, one of his attributes is that he's omnipresent, right? He is everywhere present and nowhere absent. But you and I talk about asking the Lord to come in our presence when we worship. We know he's already here as an omniscient and omnipotent God, an omnipresent God. But what are we asking when we're praying that the Lord would be present in our worship service? We're asking that his felt presence be here, that his presence would be manifest, that we would feel his presence, that we would feel his words in our heart. So it's a very sad thing when it says God left him. God left Hezekiah and left him alone. So God, when we're praying to God to intervene in our life, God many times will be there with us. And we look back on our life and said, I can't believe I made that or those right decisions. I made the right decision. And thinking about yourself, if it was just left to me, I would have made bad decisions. I would have made bad decisions. But the Lord was with me. In fact, He guided me into the way that I should go. But there can be a time when we feel a dearth, a desert of the God's presence in our life. Sometimes we pray to God and we feel like our prayers are not getting above the ceiling of our room. Feel like they're rubber balls, somebody throwing a rubber ball against the wall and it's coming back right at you. Sometimes we just feel that the presence of the Lord is gone. And sometimes we notice that. But many times we don't notice the absence of the Lord. And you know why we don't notice? Is because we're involved in other things. See, God said He left Hezekiah. He left Hezekiah in order to try him. And we're seeing here that Hezekiah failed the test. Now we're going back to 2 Kings chapter 20, verse 13. 2 Kings chapter 20, verse 13. And it says that Hezekiah hearkened unto them, these ambassadors from Babylon, and showed them all the house of his precious things, the silver and the gold and the spices and the precious ointment and all the house of his armor and all that was found in his treasures. There was nothing in his house, nor in all his dominion, that Hezekiah showed them not. See, instead of telling them about the wondrous intervention of the Lord in heaven, what did Hezekiah do? He started bragging about everything he had in life. Do you know that's what a lot of people, the only thing they have in their life is they talk about their things, places they've been, things they've done, things they've accumulated in life. And they build up a pride over that. And that can easily happen to us, brothers and sisters. We can think about the things we have and the things we're trying to gather in our life, and we don't even notice that the Lord has left us until it comes crashing down around us. And that's what happened to Hezekiah. Verse 14, Then came Isaiah the prophet unto the king Hezekiah and said unto him, What said these men, and from whence came they unto thee? And Hezekiah said, They are come from a far country, even from Babylon. And he said, What have they seen in thine house? And Hezekiah answered, All the things that are in mine house have they seen. There's nothing among my treasures that I have not shown them. And Isaiah said unto Hezekiah, Hear the word of the Lord. Behold, the days come that all that in thy house and that which thy fathers have laid up in store unto this day shall be carried unto Babylon. Nothing shall be left, saith the Lord. All the things that you're so proud of. And what was he proud of? So many precious things, precious silver, gold, spices. And we love spices around our house. And the precious ointment, and all the house of his armor, and all that was found in his treasures. All these things he was proud of. Everything that you're proud of, brothers and sisters, they're going away sometime. You're either going away during your lifetime, or they're going away when you die. You can't. The old saying is, you can't take it with you when you're gone. And that's the truth. And as I said before many times, the pharaohs tried. They really tried. They came closer than anybody trying to take it with them after they're gone. But they couldn't take it with them either. And that's what's happening to Hezekiah. This is a sad point in Hezekiah's life. Verse 16, Isaiah said unto Hezekiah, hear the word of the Lord. Behold, the days come, and all in thine house, and that which thy father's house hath laid up in store until the day, shall be carried into Babylon. Nothing shall be left, saith the Lord. Well, that's enough, right? That should do it, God, right? No, here's more. And of thy sons that shall issue from thee, which thou shalt beget, shall they take away, and they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. All his sons of his issue are going to be taken away and be made eunuchs in the king of Babylon. Then said Hezekiah unto Isaiah, good is the word of the Lord which thou hast spoken. And he said, is it not good if peace and truth be in my days? And Hezekiah, when he heard the word of the Lord, he heard what was going to happen because of his selfishness and bragging and not depending upon the Lord. It was a very sad thing. And Hezekiah could have devolved into self-pity, knowing this was the future of him and his family name and his issue in his country. But he said, you know, Lord, your word is good. He accepted it, and he says, it's enough that there is truth and peace during my days. As long as I live, the Lord has been so good, and I will treasure that and thank the Lord for that. What a great attitude Hezekiah did. Verse 20, and the rest of the acts of Hezekiah and all his might, and how he made a pool and a conduit and brought water into the city, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the king of Judah? Verse 21, and Hezekiah slept with his fathers, and Manasseh his son reigned in his stead. Isaac?